I stood on the balcony of the tallest skyscraper in the city. I looked down at the bustling streets below. I held a solid gold brick in my right hand. It was heavy. It was shiny. It was completely useless to me. I casually tossed it over the edge and watched it fall into the nearest dumpster. A screaming billionaire was currently sobbing on my imported Italian marble floor. His name was Richard. He was begging for a loan. I really wanted to tell him to go away. I had just bought this skyscraper in pure cash. I did not even want the building. I only bought it because I wanted a hot dog from the street vendor downstairs. The vendor did not have change for $1 million check. So, I bought the block. How did I get stuck in an inescapable loop of infinite wealth? I never asked for this curse. This is the story of my golden nightmare. I am Arthur Pendleton. A week ago, I was eating cold instant noodles out of a discarded shoe. Today, I am suffering from catastrophic success. Let us rewind to exactly 7 days ago. The sky was pouring freezing rain over the grim city streets. I was standing outside a dingy convenience store. My bank account balance was exactly $1. I was cold. I was tired. I was a failure in every possible sense of the word. My cruel landlord had just kicked me out of my apartment. My girlfriend had dumped me for a man who owned a moderately successful car wash. Life was a relentless joke. I walked into the store to buy a stale discount pastry. The bells on the door jingled playfully. It was a mocking sound. The cashier looked up from his magazine and sneered at my soaked clothes. "Are you going to buy that, Arthur Pendleton, or just stare at it until it grows mold?" he asked. "I am buying it," I said quietly. I slammed my last wet dollar bill onto the counter. The cashier snatched it with a look of pure disgust. The old cash register chimed loudly. Suddenly, my vision went completely black. The smell of cheap coffee vanished. A loud robotic voice echoed inside the center of my skull. "Welcome to the infinite return system. Every single dollar you spend will now be multiplied by 200 and deposited directly back into your account. Congratulations on your new life." I blinked hard. The convenience store returned to normal. I pulled my cracked phone out of my wet pocket. A text message from my bank was glowing brightly on the shattered screen. A direct deposit of $200 had just cleared. I stared at the sad pastry in my hand. I stared at the digital numbers on my phone. My heart began to beat very fast. Was I losing my mind? "Do you want a plastic bag for that, Arthur Pendleton?" the cashier asked impatiently. "No," I replied softly. "I want to buy the entire display case of pastries." The cashier barked out a harsh laugh. He clearly thought I was joking. I ignored his laughter. I walked over to the wire shelf and grabbed 10 more packaged pastries. I tossed them onto the checkout counter. The total rang up as $20. I pulled out my worn debit card. This was a massive gamble. If the system was just a cruel hallucination, my card would violently decline. The machine beeped. A beautiful green word flashed on the screen. "Approved." My phone buzzed immediately. A new bank notification appeared over my cracked screen wallpaper. $4,000 had just been deposited into my checking account. I started laughing. I laughed so hard that my lungs burned and my vision blurred. The cashier backed away slowly. He looked terrified. "Are you insane?" he whispered. "I am rich," I corrected him. I walked out of the store and stepped back into the freezing rain. The cold water felt like a holy blessing. I had $4,000. I walked directly across the street to a luxury clothing boutique. A massive security guard tried to block the glass door. I looked like a dripping wet rat. "You cannot go in there," the guard stated flatly. "Watch me," I said. I slipped past his massive arms and grabbed the first expensive suit I saw on the rack. The price tag read exactly $4,000. I brought it to the register. The clerk looked horrified. I swiped my card again. Approved. My phone buzzed violently. $800,000 entered my account in an instant. The entire world was now mine to purchase. I bought a luxury sports car. Then I bought a sprawling mansion in the hills. The mathematics of my new life were terrifying and beautiful. I spent $800,000. I received $160 million in return. Every single time I tried to empty my wallet, the universe forcefully shoved a mountain of fresh cash down my throat. By day 3, the initial joy faded away completely. It was replaced by a strange, suffocating anxiety. The money was growing far too fast. The central banks were calling me every single hour. Government officials were tracking my bizarre purchases. I was threatening to break the global economy just by ordering extra cheese on my pizzas. I needed to hide the money before the government froze my assets entirely. I walked into the largest private investment firm in the financial district. The massive lobby was made of polished glass and cold steel. I marched straight up to the front desk. "I need to speak to your boss immediately," I said. The receptionist glared at my faded gray hoodie. I refused to wear the expensive suit. "Do you have a scheduled appointment, Arthur Pendleton?" she asked with maximum condescension. Before I could even form an answer, a man in a sharp black suit confidently walked out of the private elevator. It was Richard. The billionaire. The ruthless man who owned the entire city block. "Get this pathetic beggar out of my lobby," Richard ordered his security guards. The armored security guards rushed toward me from all directions. They pulled out their heavy steel batons. I did not panic. I simply pulled out my cracked phone and opened my premium banking application. "How much does this entire investment firm cost?" I asked loudly. Richard stopped in his tracks. He stared at me like I was a diseased wild animal. "It is worth $2 billion, he sneered. "Why do you ask, peasant?" "Because I just bought it," I smiled, tapping the massive green transfer button on my screen. The digital stock screens across the entire lobby suddenly flashed blood red. A deafening security alarm started blaring from the ceiling. The banking system had accepted the impossible transaction. But my phone buzzed with a new, horrifying system message. "Warning. Complete economic collapse detected. Activating automatic assassination protocol to preserve global markets." I looked up slowly. The security guards were no longer holding steel batons. They were holding suppressed firearms. And they were all pointing directly at my head. 5 suppressed muzzles hovered exactly 2 inches from my forehead. The massive lobby was entirely silent. The automatic assassination protocol wanted me dead to save the global economy. I did not flinch. I did not beg for my life. I simply looked the lead security guard directly in his terrified eyes. "I will pay each of you $50 million right now to drop those weapons," I stated flatly. The lead guard blinked. He looked at Richard. He looked back at me. The math was incredibly simple. He dropped his heavy gun on the polished marble floor. The other 4 guards instantly followed his example. They stood in a neat line and waited for their payment. Richard was violently shaking. His expensive black suit suddenly looked very cheap. "What are you doing?" Richard screamed at his former employees. "Shoot him, Arthur Pendleton is a madman." I ignored the screaming billionaire. I calmly typed the bank details of the 5 guards into my phone. I transferred $250 million total. My thumb hovered over the glowing screen. The transaction cleared. A heavy wave of nausea hit my empty stomach. I had just spent $250 million. I closed my eyes and waited for the inevitable consequences. My phone buzzed so hard it nearly shattered my wrist bones. $50 billion. The system needed the economy to function, so my numbers had meaning. By hoarding all the wealth in the universe, I was the ultimate virus. Mr. Pendleton, the lead guard interrupted my tired thoughts. My name is Marcus. We are now your private security team. Where do we go? We are going to buy a private island, I said softly. And an underground bunker. And maybe a very large sandwich. I am absolutely starving. Marcus nodded respectfully. He dragged the sobbing billionaire out of our way. We walked out of the glass building and stepped onto the busy city sidewalk. The rain had finally stopped. The gray clouds were slowly parting. Suddenly, a massive armored helicopter dropped out of the sky. It did not have military markings. It had a massive golden dollar sign painted on the side of the metal hull. The blades spun with a deafening roar. The heavy wind knocked over a nearby hot dog stand. The vendor ran away screaming. I was mildly annoyed. I really wanted a hot dog. Men in solid gold combat armor jumped out of the hovering aircraft. They hit the wet pavement with heavy, mechanical thuds. These were not regular corporate mercenaries. These were system enforcers. The universe was sending its absolute best debt collectors to balance the cosmic ledger. Protect Arthur Pendleton, Marcus shouted loudly. Marcus raised his heavy weapon. A golden enforcer swatted Marcus away like a bothersome fly. Marcus crashed into a concrete street lamp and slumped over completely unconscious. I sighed deeply. Good help was apparently very hard to keep these days. The lead golden enforcer walked slowly toward me. His heavy boots cracked the concrete pavement. A robotic voice boomed from his metallic helmet. You have exceeded the maximum allowable wealth threshold. You will be liquidated immediately. Why was my life always so dramatically complicated? I just wanted a quiet apartment and a hot meal. Now I was fighting robotic tax collectors in the middle of the street. I looked closely at the enforcer. He was covered in solid gold armor. Gold was a simple commodity. It had a market price. Everything in this world had a price. How much for the suit? I asked. The enforcer stopped moving. His mechanical gears whirred in sheer confusion. This is grade 9 system armor. It is not for sale, the robotic voice replied. Everything is for sale, I countered. I offer you $10 billion for the armor. The enforcer froze completely. A bright green light flashed on his helmet visor. The system was fundamentally programmed to facilitate financial transactions. It could not refuse a valid, overwhelming purchase offer. The golden armor suddenly unlatched from the enforcer. The heavy metal plates fell to the street with a loud crash. A confused, pale man in normal underwear was left standing in the freezing cold. I smiled for the first time all day. I had found the ultimate loophole. I could buy the weapons directly out of their hands. Are you ready to die, Arthur Pendleton? The pale man yelled in helpless frustration. I did not answer him. My phone buzzed again. $2 trillion entered my account. I grimaced. The smile vanished from my face. The math was getting completely out of control. I was basically a walking black hole of inflation. Buying my way out of danger only made the danger multiply. Target acquired, a new robotic voice echoed from the cloudy sky. I looked up. 3 more golden helicopters were descending rapidly. But these machines did not contain men in armor. These helicopters were carrying massive, glowing metallic bombs. They were going to blow up the entire city block just to erase my bank account. The 3 glowing metallic bombs dropped from the golden helicopters. I had exactly 3 seconds before the entire city block turned into a crater of ash and melted concrete. I did not run. I just tapped my cracked phone screen and opened the custom offer menu. I typed in $30 billion for the 3 explosive devices. The digital prompt flashed bright green. The 3 heavy bombs instantly halted in midair. They gently floated down to the wet pavement and landed with a soft thud. They belonged to me now. My phone buzzed aggressively. $6 trillion poured into my checking account. The numbers were getting so large they were starting to blur together into a meaningless string of zeros. The golden helicopters hovered above me in total confusion. Their deadly payload was gone. "Why are you doing this, Arthur Pendleton?" the naked enforcer yelled from the sidewalk. He was shivering violently in the cold wind. "You cannot just buy a tactical military strike." "I just did," I replied tiredly. "Do you want to sell me those helicopters next, or are you going to fly away quietly?" The sky darkened instantly. The system did not like my arrogant attitude. The gray clouds swirled into a massive digital vortex. Red numbers cascaded down from the sky like glowing neon rain. The physical world around me began to pixelate and dissolve. The street lamps flickered and turned into strings of green binary code. I tried to tap my phone to buy the nearest hot dog stand for shelter. My screen was completely frozen. A heavy, oppressive silence blanketed the entire street. Why does the universe always punish the ambitious? I was suddenly trapped inside a digital quarantine zone. The naked enforcer laughed aloud. It was a cold, cruel sound. "The system has frozen your assets, Arthur Pendleton," he mocked. "You are locked in an economic quarantine. Your infinite funds are entirely useless here." He was absolutely right. I pulled out my physical debit card. The plastic was slowly melting into gray ash in my palm. The green numbers on my phone screen turned a dull, lifeless gray. I had trillions of dollars, and I could not even buy a piece of chewing gum. The 3 golden helicopters began to descend rapidly. Their side doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. Dozens of metallic drones swarmed out into the freezing air. They were heavily armed and glowing with red targeting lasers. I needed a new strategy immediately. I ducked behind a melted concrete pillar as laser fire erupted across the street. The heavy blasts shattered the glass windows of the investment firm behind me. The drones were incredibly fast. They were closing the distance rapidly. I looked at the 3 metallic bombs sitting quietly on the pavement. I owned them. They were my personal property. "Hey," I shouted over the deafening explosions. "How do I detonate my property?" The naked enforcer sneered from his safe distance. "You cannot, Arthur Pendleton," he shouted back. "The detonators require System Authority Level 4. You are just a peasant with a bloated bank account." System Authority. That was the missing piece of the puzzle. I did not need to buy physical items. I needed to buy the rules themselves. My phone was frozen for external market purchases, but the internal system interface was still running in the background. I opened the settings menu on my shattered screen. I navigated past the display options and the notification toggles. I found a hidden developer tab labeled System Authority. It was locked behind a massive paywall. The price was exactly $500 billion. I smiled grimly. I tapped the purchase button with my thumb. The transaction cleared instantly. The gray screen on my phone shattered into a brilliant, blinding white light. A warm, powerful energy surged through my veins. The deep bags under my eyes faded slightly. My posture straightened. I stood up slowly from behind the concrete pillar. The laser fire continued to rain down around me. The burning beams harmlessly deflected off an invisible energy shield surrounding my body. I raised my right hand. The dozens of metallic drones instantly stopped firing. They froze completely in midair. I possessed System Authority Level 4. I was no longer just a wealthy participant in this chaotic game. I was a regional manager. "Self-destruct," I commanded quietly. The drones exploded simultaneously. A massive wave of heat washed over the ruined street. Flaming metal debris rained down on the wet pavement. The asphalt split open, revealing a massive, glowing chasm. The system was done sending low-level enforcers. A giant, mechanical beast crawled slowly out of the glowing pit. It was a dragon made entirely of compressed diamond and dark matter. It did not want my money. It wanted my soul. The diamond dragon roared. The sound shattered every remaining glass window on the ruined street. It lunged directly at my chest with its massive jaws. My invisible energy shield sparked violently and collapsed under the sheer pressure of its dark matter teeth. I threw myself sideways onto the wet asphalt. The heavy beast crashed into the ground where I had just been standing. It swallowed a melted concrete pillar completely whole. I stared at the towering monster. It was breathtakingly expensive. Compressed diamond scales shimmered with deadly cosmic radiation. I tapped my cracked phone screen frantically. I tried to access the System Authority menu again. The application crashed entirely. A new error message popped up in bold red text. System override denied. You cannot manage an auditor, Arthur Pendleton, the naked enforcer yelled from his pathetic puddle on the sidewalk. That is a Class Omega Dead Eater. It does not care about your digital numbers. It is going to balance the ledger with your physical life. Was I really going to die in a wet street as a literal trillionaire? What was the exact point of having infinite wealth if a shiny lizard could just eat my soul? The dragon circled me slowly. Its eyes burned with an absolute zero cold. It was calculating the nutritional value of my miserable existence. I needed to think like a ruthless corporate raider. If I could not buy the monster directly, I needed to buy its employer. I opened the main web browser on my broken phone. I searched for the Cosmic Ledger headquarters. My fingers were trembling from the freezing wind and sheer terror. The beast opened its massive jaws to consume me. Dark energy gathered in its glowing throat. The air temperature dropped so fast that my wet clothes instantly froze solid. I typed furiously into the search bar. I found a parent holding company listed in the darkest, most hidden corner of the universal stock market. It was simply called the System. The market capitalization was technically infinite. But my bank account was also currently displaying a golden infinity symbol. Infinity minus infinity was a math problem I was willing to risk my life on. The dragon let out a mechanical roar that shook my internal organs. Error. Target is attempting a prohibited financial maneuver, the dragon spoke in a deep, rumbling robotic voice. Prepare for immediate soul extraction. I would like to make a hostile takeover bid, I said loudly to the empty, swirling sky. I pressed the green purchase button with my frozen thumb. The glass on my phone screen shattered completely. Hot blood dripped slowly from my nose. The sheer mathematical weight of the impossible transaction was tearing my physical brain apart. The dragon unleashed a massive torrent of destructive dark matter. The beam hit me squarely in the chest. Everything went completely silent. The world dissolved into complete nothingness. The darkness slowly faded away. I was not dead. I was standing in a perfectly white, endless void. The air was warm and smelled faintly of expensive vanilla. The terrifying diamond dragon was sitting obediently next to me like a giant, glittering puppy. It was wearing a small digital collar around its thick neck. The collar was glowing a bright, friendly green. I had successfully bought the entire company. Transfer complete, a soft, pleasant voice announced from the empty void. Welcome to the board of directors, Arthur Pendleton. You are now the majority shareholder of Absolute Reality. The naked enforcer was entirely gone. The ruined city was miles away in another dimension. I was standing next to a massive obsidian table in the center of nowhere. I rubbed my tired, heavy eyes. I was still wearing my wet, faded gray hoodie. I looked down at my broken phone. The infinity symbol was blinking steadily, perfectly stable. I had finally won the ultimate game. I owned the system itself. I could finally go to sleep in a warm bed and ignore the universe forever. I placed my hands in my pockets and breathed a massive sigh of relief. But a heavy wooden door suddenly materialized in the middle of the white void. The door was violently kicked open from the other side. A tall woman in a sharp silver business suit walked confidently into my new office. She carried a thick briefcase made of glowing red energy. She marched directly up to my obsidian table and slammed a massive stack of glowing paperwork down in front of me. "Congratulations on your recent promotion, Arthur Pendleton," she said with a cold, terrifying smile. "However, you have inherited the corporate debt of the previous owners. You currently owe the Multiversal Revenue Service roughly 7 trillion human souls in unpaid cosmic property taxes." I stared at the glowing paperwork. I stared at my phone with its infinite bank account. "How will you be paying your balance today?" she asked smoothly. Digital numbers were entirely useless here. They wanted actual souls. I leaned back against my glittering diamond dragon and sighed heavily. I was right back at the bottom of the financial food chain.